If you were building like an AI design tool and you said, okay, I'm going to make a sign up flow and make it blue and it's cool. But then eventually you want to get those details. What's the UI to handle that? I think a lot of products are going to have that sort of fundamental challenge of transition and kind of going in and out of generative experiences versus precise ones. Like the web right now, or every, I think, product is built around these like very precise UIs. Like go book a flight. We've created the lowest friction way to create precision. We have all this, the order of things, the radio versus drop down versus search. We figured out a lot, but we don't need to throw all that away. We just need to present it at the right moment. I think as a designer, the most important thing right now is just to be comfortable and get good at explaining these like entirely dynamic experiences. I think the other big thing is there's no common patterns here.
Folks, today's topic is going to be phenomenal. If you're a designer and you're wondering, oh my God, AI is something I'm really passionate about, how do I become a designer in the artificial intelligence space? To answer those questions, I have Henry Modisett with me, who is the head of design at Perplexity AI. And today we're going to be talking about his career journey and how he ended up joining Perplexity AI and his experience working in the AI space. Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I just got to see this countdown UI for our podcast app. And I would love to get to design that. Like it's so intentional.
Wow. As soon as you mentioned that, what I love from our interaction is you mentioned that you don't go to Dribble. You don't go to like just online mock-ups to get design inspiration. You actually look at actual products for the micro interactions, design patterns, and flows. Why is that? Why not use Dribble as inspiration?
Yeah, I would say sometimes I do, and I always have, especially I guess like when it first came out and it was invite only, probably like a very different time on the internet. Like I was reading Dan Cederholm's book on how to write CSS. So I was like a big fan of that like era of design internet. But for me, when I'm trying to figure out what to do or how to solve a problem or what to build, I'm really only interested in looking at products that people actually use for a bunch of reasons. One, I would say it's really hard to get someone to use a product. It's really hard. If you're building something that is either fun or useful, or there's probably only 3 types of consumer products: fun, utility, and helping you find love. And if someone's using something in that one of those 3 categories, then there's something to learn from that product. It's not always design, and because design isn't like the thing that makes a lot of these companies or these products really successful, but there's still like a lot to learn. So if you're designing something that has many users, it has to work for everyone in the world, or at least a lot of people. And that means you have to make things like intuitive and follow common patterns and be part of a brand or part of a system. It has to make sense in I guess in many dimensions. There's like a cohesion that you can feel from big products. And so I like to figure that out. Like the most interesting products to me have really taken a crack at that. Go poke around on Google Maps. You'll find like 1,000 really neat interaction details. In every little corner of that product, they've had to like both do something very novel, but also make sure that it's pretty intuitive. And often on Dribble, it's like just explorations, which are cool, and people are more capable of taking risks. So I think it's great to be able to look at both. But I love looking at real products where someone actually had to say, I believe that this is going to be something that is beautiful or intuitive, and I'm going to convince an engineer to program this, right? So many things had to happen for that thing to be on your phone and for you to interact with it. So I love that speaks to the conviction. And so that means there's probably something to learn from that.
I literally took your advice and gave it to a lot of these other design students that I'm mentoring. And I said that there is a real business case study when you look at actual products out there in the marketplace. So in my case, I use an Android phone. So I go to the Google Play Store. And if I am, let's say, looking at the language learning category, These are paid apps that have to make money. So if they have an interaction or something, there's some thought process behind it. It's not just, oh, let me create this interaction because it's cool or it's slick.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the more you learn about anything, the more it like reveals itself, right? I was watching a documentary about sommeliers because I think a lot of people that aren't really into wine, they're like, it all tastes the same, or I can't tell the difference. But there's a significant amount of training that they go into to train their brain to even pick up on the flavor. You eat 1,000 apricots, and then if there is a bit of apricot in that wine, you're actually going to be able to pick it out. And I think the same thing is true for designers. Once you get over this hump where you start to, instead of just flowing through products and just like monkey brains pressing buttons, the way that you want people to use your stuff, like there's a point where you cross over and then you start seeing UI, which is a bit of a curse on one hand, but at the other hand, you can really appreciate and start to deconstruct the elegance of really big, interesting products like, I don't know, Instagram. At first glance, it's so simple. There's nothing there. But if you really think about it, there's just quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot of complexity that they've been able to manage and depth that they've created.
I'm just very piqued and interested by your career. You've also worked at Google. And one of the things you told me, you can't prototype an inbox. You cannot mock up an inbox. It hit me really hard. Can you go a little bit more in depth about it? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate to spend my whole career working on, I would say, like dynamic experiences, feeds, notification systems, and email. Every single person that uses your product, they open it up, they're going to see something different. So how do you make sure that as a designer and as like a product owner, that everyone has a good experience? And when you're trying to decide the mechanics of that product, how do you make good decisions that enable that experience? So I find that there's this like ambiguity that I think a lot of people find overwhelming, but I love it. You have to accept that, okay, maybe 10% of the time, the thing that you made and spent all this time on is just going to totally suck for somebody because there's just all this indeterminism in it. This was the beginning of my career. I would say that I spent my time at Google just learning, observing, taking notes. At this time, doing a lot of Photoshop mockups. This is 12. And there were some really interesting people. Gmail was at this peak of its success as a web product. And then they were trying to figure out how to make it a great mobile product, as well as exploring alternative versions of email. What would be the future of email? This was around the time when this was before, if everyone remembers, Inbox, the Google product came out. So this is what we were working on. We, meaning the team, I was just there, but I was watching them figure this out and helping with mockups. I built a prototype, but we also had, if anyone remembers, the app Sparrow that the Google had acquired, that team. So there was a lot of brilliant people that I could just observe and learn from. But anyways, to your question, if you're trying to figure out how email should work, it's really hard to just mock it up with static images, because the experience of email is getting an email and figuring out what to do with it and how you mark the sort of the red state, or is there a red state? How do things, when you get like 1,000 emails that come in, where do they go? How do they cluster themselves? If you need to respond to a bunch of emails, like what's the feeling of working through them? It's just, there's so many very dynamic experiences that it's just like, how do you mock all that up? And why would you? Of course, we mocked up like, what does it look like? But in terms of making all the decisions, I don't know if you remember with Inbox, the vision was to many people in the world get like a ton of emails, ton of spam. Some of it's great, some of it's bad. How do you make sure that the good stuff is in the right place and the bad stuff's in the wrong place? And then the stuff in the middle is, we don't know. And then some of it is good for Gmail because they have a relationship with businesses. So how do you make an inbox that works for everybody? And so their vision was to have it all dynamically organized for you. And there's a little bit of this that still lives on in the tabs in Gmail in the top, where there's like primary and social and updates and such. But making the decisions on how that worked, we had to just build it and live in it, and try it out. And then especially when we got to doing user research, because we may spend all this time on it and we can imagine. It's very easy for, I think, designers and engineers and PMs to imagine software, to imagine edge cases and experiences. Oh, this would feel good. This would feel bad. But if you're trying to like pitch that to a regular person, they're not going to be able to follow. So they need to try it. And when we were doing user research, like even a crappy prototype wasn't going to cut it, because we'd show them a prototype with fake data in there. It's like some other guy's email.
Lorem ipsum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, lorem ipsum, and then, or just like me writing emails, hey, Barack Obama said hello. Like it feels like a toy. But as soon as you get like an email from your spouse or a job, you reply to a job and you get that response back, those are those moments where email really needs to work, right? Where you can't miss the email and you can't misunderstand where it went, and you don't, or you need to, there was like a bank statement that you need to find again. And if you can't find it, those are those moments where the product needs to be fantastic. And without something that's interactive, that has your real data in there, it's pretty hard to make the best design decisions. So it's this basic argument for dog fooding, but it's like it gets you out of mockups very quickly. And so I think a lot of products need to be built in that way, where you just get something kind of crappy working and you just try to live in it until you figure it out.
But going with this line of thinking, where instead of just mocking stuff from Figma, we're like, hey, actually, let's get into code. Let's prototype this thing and let's build this out and put real data into it. I think it also requires a designer to be somewhat comfortable with code. Would you say so?
I think it requires a designer, at the very least, to be comfortable with focusing on the product mechanics as the most important thing. Because you could be sitting next to an engineer and they're building it, but the time it takes to make something pixel perfect and beautiful, there's a time and a place for that. And I think in this mode, it's like you got to do it at the end, because you could build something and then just throw it in the trash like a week later. Those details aren't going to make or break the premise. But I think it does help to build something in code. It's a big topic, but I think for something very dynamic. So here's an example, just in a very visual sense, figuring out how a feed should look. Even if I mock it up, even if I put in like a bunch of fake data, even if I put in a bunch of real data, I'm not going to feel super confident about that spacing or that type size unless I've scrolled through 1,000 feed stories, because and not just my feed, someone else's feed. When I've built these things, I'm always tweaking it until it's right. And it's just a lot easier to be in code and tweaking it and looking at just scrolling and messing with stuff. I know that people create such an infrastructure with Figma, like you can pipe data in, but it's just not the same, I don't think.
One could also argue that when you're making those tweaks as a designer in code, you could also just go next to your engineer and keep asking them every time. Or is it just cumbersome?
I think it totally depends on the relationship that you have, and remote work can make that even more complicated. And honestly, sometimes I just don't know. There's a lot of a very traditional design engineering handoff is like, designer thought through everything. Here's the mocks. Engineer's like, I'm going to put that in. And in a perfect world, it's like 1-to-1. But I don't know. I'm not like right all the time. And I don't even want to be. I want to try it and tweak it. And especially if it's an animation, I'm going to just change the timing by 50 milliseconds. And that can be very annoying and inefficient if that's like, it totally depends. Sometimes it's fun with the right person to go into those back and forths and fiddling. But sometimes it just takes a long time. And for me, I like to just get things 80% of the way and then just live in it and mold the real thing.
Because you know where I'm going with this. A lot of designers today believe that you don't need to code because there's all these no-code tools out there. So there's no motivation for me as a designer to learn code.
Yeah.
So then what is your response to that, Henry?
I would say I don't think there's much point in being dogmatic about anything. I have always coded. I studied computer science. I've definitely come from a background of making things. And for me, I like having a hand in the craft of making something. It's a big topic. And I think it's like overly debated. If you got to maybe take a first principles perspective, every company needs to ship good software, ideally, right? That's what everyone wants. And there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. What are we building? How's it going to work? What does it look like? And then we need to get that into the customer's hands, and it needs to be as good as we thought it could be. And I think with various problems, code is like going to slow you down a lot because you got to build the abstraction. Oh, there's a bug or the data's not loading. It's a total destruction of a free design process. On the other hand, I think getting something perfect in a mock-up is like you're doubling the work, right? Like, why bother? Your job as a designer isn't to make a great mock-up. It's to make the experience great for the user. So for me, I have the luxury, of course, of getting to pick which mode I'm in. Like all week, actually, I was trying to solve some hard visual problems. I'm not touching code. I'm trying to figure out like the layout of the site and changing some colors and all this stuff where code is just going to be very distracting. But then once I pick a direction and I want to see how it flows with like screen size changing and like when you have lots of animation happening, like how do things work together? It's a blessing to just be in the code and molding it, getting in the final details there without having to use the design tool as the communication method. I get to choose, which is wonderful. It's hard for me to give advice to anyone other than don't be dogmatic. Don't like say, hey, this is the right way to do everything. I'm not like very old, but I've seen the tools change every few years since I started making software. And I think all we should really care about is how to give our customers like the best thing. And I love getting to directly manipulate the thing that people use. I find joy in the craft of that.
In your case, because you are a designer who designs and codes, would you say that your handoff actually is more efficient to engineering, and that when engineers look at your designs is actually much more faster for them to execute it because not only have you designed it, but you also tweak the code on the subtle animations, interactions, and all these other things as well. So the engineer doesn't have to figure all these things out.
Yeah. And the way that I typically work is I'll build some UI and say, hey, this is like what it should look like. And this is how it's going to feel, but it doesn't actually do anything yet. Like when you press that button, nothing happens. Can you make it actually functional? Or the other way around, someone will make something functional and then I'll just go polish it up. So for example, the way that I do mobile development is whether it's Android or Swift, Kotlin or Swift, we'll wireframe out, okay, here's like the sign up flow. These are the screens. This is where the sort of generally where the buttons go. But when it's time to get the perfect spacing and sizing, I'll just go in and do that myself because it's very easy. I think anyone can do it. And if anyone joined my team and wanted me to just point them how to do that, I would show them because there's like kind of deeper, more existential, I think, benefits to designers being in the code. It changes the organization quite a lot. It changes, I would say, maybe sometimes the power dynamics, depending on how the company operates. So I want to build an organization where this stuff's a little bit more flexible. I think our tools are defining our process a little bit too much. If I had to scale a design team to 100 people, yeah, we should probably just say, hey, designers use these tools, and those tools are communication vectors between this org and that org. And it's like a way to clean things up at scale for sure. But we're a small company. I like to think we can do what's best for us, do what's best for getting software out as fast as possible and with still maintaining a quality bar.
Makes sense. What I am very curious to know is, having worked at Google, Quora, what set of events made you join Perplexity AI?
So when I was at Quora, I worked on the feed team. So the Quora feed, it's personalized ranked system powered by machine learning. Everything I've worked on at Quora had some machine learning component to it. So I like working on these, like I said before, these very dynamic kind of algorithmically generated experiences. I think it's very fun to think through how to scale. So the conversations between like a designer and an engineer on something like that, it's more like we have to establish principles about the experience at a very high level. Like a feed should feel this way. It should be personalized. You should see stuff from people that you follow most of the time. Generally, the stuff should be pretty new. right? These aren't hard rules, right? It's like feelings. And then everything with machine learning is like the statistical likelihood. So I like working on that stuff. And I also, because I like working on that stuff, I met some engineers who are exceptional at these things. So the Perplexity was founded by a few Quora feed engineers who then went on to go deeper
I
into
did not
AI.
know that.
So when they started the company, they hit me up, and I think I'm the only designer that they ever worked with. So I just got lucky that they knocked on my door. But at the time I was doing just very early 0 to 1 startups, and it was just like a great match. I was excited to just try working on something totally new. And obviously I didn't even really understand it when I signed up or when I started contracting with them. And then there was a point where we built this demo of a way to ask a question and you would get an answer. And something that I'd always wanted to build at Quora was an app just for question asking. And we did build a prototype, and it sucked because if the question didn't already exist on Quora, you just were like waiting for it to happen. It was 30% of the time or whatever. You just had a terrible experience. It was definitely not something worth launching, but I've always wanted to have that in my pocket, right? Like the ability to ask anything you can possibly imagine and just get an answer. And when they showed me the demo of Perplexity, like the very, very first version, it didn't even have UI. I was like, this is so cool. I want to work on this. That was it. I just felt like I wanted to bring this thing to the world. I wanted to have it personally. And I'd like to believe that other people would benefit from it too.
Wow. I love the passion that you have as a designer. Hey, this is something that I want to bring to the world. This is something I want to help improve. And that is your criteria, how you're figuring out what to design and what to work on.
I had this moment when I worked on Gmail. It's called Gmail 2.0. It was really the first iPhone app that I think picked up on Gmail. I was on the Caltrain. I was like walking down the aisle and everybody had it on their phone. Like you could just see it. The scale of impact you can have building software and affecting like people's daily lives positively, hopefully, it's incredibly rewarding. And hopefully it doesn't go to your head. Like I find it very humbling as well, because it's in that case, it's like people's emails. That's incredibly vital. But I just love the idea of these moments where you make something novel and you show it to somebody and they're like, wow, this did something for me. This was like exciting or delightful or super useful. And that the scale that you get to bring millions of people in the world, it's just incredible. So yeah, like when I like building new stuff, I just like making things and sharing them. There's nothing better than that. We're incredibly lucky to have that as our job. And also that it makes good money.
I can't even imagine how excited and awesome you must have felt when you're just going around on the train and you're like, oh my God, everyone's looking at their email. And then I was in the design team that designed that. Wow. Like I've created something that is helping people, is having impact.
You're at home, you got your headphones on, you're in Figma, you're just like making these decisions and you're like, oh, that looks pretty good. It's so easy to forget. If you're lucky enough to work on something with users, even if there's 100 of them, I think it's very hard for people to imagine scale, right? It's the scale of the universe. It's impossible to imagine 50 million users, impossible to imagine. It doesn't really feel different in your head than 500 million users. But yeah, for me, that was like, I had a few moments like that early on in my career where that I realized that there was like actually quite a lot of people like interacting with the thing that I made or the decisions that I made. And with Gmail, it was I did the search in the iPhone app. So it was like a small slice of it, but still, yeah, it's what a feeling. And I feel like I'm just chasing that high, right?
It seems like you already knew the Perplexity founders from your time at Quora. So that definitely helped, like just working with them and they knew you as well. So that kind of answered the question about the trust building, the relationship. But did you have to, for someone else who wants to enter the space and they're like, hey, Henry, I want to be an AI designer. I have the design chops, but I don't really know much about the space. What do I have to level up on? How can I break into the space? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think every software will have this indeterminism built into it. Starting now, it's already happening. And it's just always going to be true because it's incredibly powerful to be able to replace a deterministic system with an indeterministic one, or to enhance something that that humans were doing and replace it and as an accelerator, like everything should have that. Before like cloud computing or something, you had to think about like, where do my files live? And now that exists, okay, the way we think about software and the way we design it, there's not like a save button anywhere anymore. That's just the new paradigm that changes everything. Or mobile, that's just how software works now. So you should figure out how to design mobile apps. I think for AI, it's that being comfortable with and being able to visualize and wrap your head around. And this kind of goes back to the mock-up side, like what's the non-deterministic outcome here that I need to represent? And how do I explain that to the engineer that I'm working with? For example, we have this feature called Copilot. And the way it works is when you ask a question, sometimes it asks you questions back. And it also decides to use like a variety of UI to do that, because I don't want you to just have to type all the time. If we can present you with 3 options and they're just buttons, that's better. So there's like an infinite set of possibilities. Like sometimes it happens, it picks different UI. I don't even know what it's going to say most of the time ever. So I have to design the buttons. I don't know how big they need to be because I don't know what text is going to go in them, all this stuff. So I think as a designer, the most important thing right now is just to be comfortable and get good at explaining these like entirely dynamic experiences. So that's one big thing. I think the other big thing is there's no common patterns here. We don't know the right way to invoke the black box or to manipulate it or to transition from really broad, magical kind of you punch something in, you get something out. Eventually, you probably want to get to some precision somehow. So like, how do you transition between if you're building like an AI design tool and you said, okay, I'm going to make a sign up flow and make it blue and it's cool. But then eventually you want to get those details. So how do you like, what's the UI to handle that? I think a lot of products are going to have that sort of fundamental challenge of transition and kind of going in and out of generative experiences versus precise ones. Like the web right now, or, every, I think, product is built around these like very precise UIs, like go book a flight. We've created the lowest friction way to create precision. We have all this, the order of things, the radio versus drop down versus search. Like we figured out a lot, but we don't need to throw all that away. We just need to present it at the right moment. We don't need to throw away everything, but we're going to have to come up with new things and then we're going to have to figure out how to blend them. And that'll be really fun.
My takeaway would be normally designers work in spaces where most of the stuff is figured out, the flows, the steps, the best practices, the best patterns. But if someone's very excited to work in the AI design space, then they have to get comfortable with ambiguity, where there's no best practice. You have to figure it out. You don't exactly know this is the exact order. This is exactly what you're going to show. Everything is changing. Everything is dynamic, the word I use.
Yeah. And everything is not just a design problem, but there's like kind of a new communication challenge with working with engineers. So you're like, okay, we're going to put a black box here. Neither of us really know what it's going to pump out most of the time, but let's say it's text. Okay, let's agree on like the system and we'll jam the magic through that. And hopefully it stays within that system. And so that's where it helps to be able to talk about principles. And this is like the type of outcome we want. And then, you got to prototype it and see if it's living up to what you're aiming for. But I think it will be more important than ever to not be too hung up on like static image mockups.
Designers watching this or listening to this right now are going to be motivated and they're going to be like, this weekend, I'm going to apply to any AI design job opportunity that's out there. But now here's the catch. Many of them are going to face rejections, right? They're not going to be able to break into the AI design space right away. The rejection is going to suck. And I know you in your career have faced your fair share of rejections. But talk to me about the one particular one, which was when you were at the age of 20 at Val, right?
Yes. I would say I've been on every side of this. I've been rejected and gotten to hire people and gotten to decide not to hire people. So I think about this all in a very human way. I've been in my career where I've, even as after I've been a manager, gotten rejected too. It's part of life. And really everything is just like about fit. And I think as soon as you accept that, there's so many reasons why you might not fit in a company, whether it's like your skills or your experience or your background, or maybe maybe you're the perfect fit and the company just for whatever reason realizes they can't take somebody on. I've had that happen before. We're like, hey, we really like this person, but we don't have anyone to mentor them. And so we just can't do it. You'll never know why. And you always just have to keep going. I've had some interesting experience. It reminds me of when I was like really early in my career. I really wanted to work at Facebook, the Facebook design team. It was like this was in 2011 maybe. And I applied, and your resume links to your portfolio and all that. And so like after I applied, for like the next 2 weeks, I would go on like Google Analytics every day and just see if anyone in Palo Alto had gone to my website, because I wanted to know if they were actually ever even going to look at me. And I remember one day it popped up, and I was like, oh no, they're like looking at my stuff. And that made me more nervous. And then eventually I was like for an internship, and yeah, I don't even know if they were hiring interns. They're probably like, who's this kid? I think it's fun to get excited about stuff. And then I was so sad when it didn't work out, but that's fine. I think it's just important to try always, and then go back to the drawing board if you feel like you can come to some conclusion why it didn't work out. And then another company I applied for is this company called Valve. And so if you're not familiar with Valve, they make video games, and they make this video game marketplace called Steam. And it's, I would say, incredibly successful. And Valve is an interesting company because they were started in the 90s by a bunch of ex-Microsoft people. And in a very sort of strong rejection of, I would say, 90s Microsoft corporate culture, they created their own vision of how software companies should operate. And they have this thing called the Valve Handbook. I think everyone should read it. It's really fun. But it has their vision for how a company should operate. And it's cool because it's like a total offshoot of Microsoft. They really went in their own direction. And it's, I would say, very distinct from how Silicon Valley startups and even bigger companies operate. So the way that management culture works, the way that decisions are made, the way that the sort of organization is designed, Silicon Valley is like pretty homogenous in this, I think. There's actually not that many different ways.
One of the funny things, just to interrupt you there, is like, I think one of the co-founders of Valve is Gabe or someone like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a while, my previous background, I worked on Linux and open source software and stuff.
Yeah.
So at one of the Linux conferences, I think the Valve team and Gabe actually showed up. But again, back then, I'm talking about 12, 13 time frame. Yeah. So I just remember seeing him, but I didn't know much about it. It was so new. Like, they just launched the Steam marketplace, and I'm like, wait, what is this happening again?
That's awesome.
So go on, you're saying?
Yeah, they have many interesting things about their culture, but one of them is there's no management. It's like a totally flat organization. And so when you decide that, you have to create you have to solve all these other problems in weird ways. Like, how do you decide what to work on? Who makes decisions about hiring or like promotions? And I don't know, I've not been inside. It sounds interesting. I can also imagine a bunch of really weird challenges to that. But I had applied, and at one point they responded, and I was like, oh my God, this is a surprise. And I chatted with a few of their designers, and I really found that they think about software design very similar to how I was thinking about software design, which I think is actually very distinct from how at the time maybe a lot of video game companies were operating, because they're operating more around how movie studios operate, where they sort of collect it's like a multi-year process. They collect the people that they need at the stage that they're at, and then they let them go. It's like very thrashy. Whereas Valve was like, let's just keep everyone and keep them through the life cycle. And once they're done with their part, they'll just go to another project. A very more how normal software companies operate.
Yeah.
And they flew me out to Seattle, and I got to tour the office, and it was very cool because they have all these like video game statues and stuff. It's a cool office experience as far as they go. But then as I was walking around, I realized that like everyone in this company was like in their 40s at least. And I just like immediately realized that I'm just like a kid.
How old were you?
I was 20. Yeah.
Okay. So you were half their age. Got it.
There was no young people in there. Where in contrast, especially at the time I was doing internships, it's like you go to Facebook and it's like only kids and nobody knows what they're doing. And so this place felt like, although it was a video game company and it was very fun, they had this like very fun vibe. It also was like, it felt so serious. It felt like I was visiting like the elders in their career, and it felt like they were just everyone knew so much. And when they interviewed me, they were like, we're not going to continue, but we like to establish a relationship in case it works out another time, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, I was so bummed that I essentially rejected, but I thought that I'd never thought that interviewing could work like that, where it's like, we're going to interview you and get to know each other, but this is a long-term thing. And let's check in the next few years. And I quite like that. I like the idea that a rejection is like a let's talk again later. And I've seen that play out a few times in my career. I I actually applied at that same time in my life. I applied to and was at the time they were like, we're not hiring interns. Why are you applying? And then a few years later, I ended up joining. And I like the idea of creating a culture of that, of like, this is everything is about fit and timing. And if it doesn't work out, we can at least create a good experience for you so that maybe things work out in the future.
The traditional design interviews, it's very binary, very transactional, where the designer who gets rejected feels like something is wrong with me. Like I did something wrong. Maybe I'm lacking something.
Not good enough.
Yeah, I'm not good enough. What you're saying that the way the interview process should be is communicating that, hey, there's nothing necessarily wrong with you. It's just either it's not a good fit or not the right time, or it's not just a good skills match. I
Yeah.
think this way it's less personal, I feel like.
Yeah. There's skills, knowledge, and abilities. And a lot of the times it's just like skills and knowledge. And people always assume it's ability. Like that, you always assume the worst thing about yourself when you get rejected. And for anyone out there, they should just reach for stuff and try to take away the right things and then keep moving on. I think it is part of life.
When we were walking back from the coffee shop in San Francisco, you said a few lines that really hit me hard. We were just like talking about just general, like having a career in Silicon Valley. And you said, you don't move up the ladder in San Francisco, for example, and then buy a home. You either win the lottery or you move up. And that's your chapter, your San Francisco chapter. You do your chapter, then you get something from it, or you just move on. Blew my mind away. Because you've gone through it as well.
Yeah, I used to live in San Francisco. I since left. I love San Francisco. And I would say that, yeah, San Francisco fits into this relationship that people have with, I think, cities in America where you often go and you have the chapter there and then you leave. I think New York is like this as well. I think with San Francisco, it always felt, especially at the time that I was there, that the only people that were settling they were settling because they like won the lottery. And this is very much the cost of housing and all of that. And I don't know, it's a interesting educational experience, like having your chapter in San Francisco, getting to be in Silicon Valley. I definitely appreciate my time there. And I think, but it's fun to have chapters in different cities because you get different things out of them. I think one thing I love about San Francisco is that for better or worse, everyone thinks that they can change the world. Not everyone's thinking at that scale in other places that I lived. And it's sometimes I appreciate like not being around that mindset, having someone who just has a different type of life with different values. But yeah, San Francisco definitely, there's like this sort of unbridled ambition. It is intoxicating when you're there.
100%. Henry, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, my friend.
Thanks for having me.